The first gunshot sent a flock of starlings scattering into the midnight sky as Hannah Bailey slipped her younger sister's trembling hand into her own. 18-year-old Hannah's heart pounded against her ribs like a war drum as she pulled 17-year-old Emma along behind her through the moonlit ranch yard. Their uncle's drunken shouts echoed from the main house, growing louder as the back door slammed open. "Run," Hannah whispered urgently. "Don't look back." Nevada Territory, 1876. The Bailey sisters had endured 3 brutal years under their Uncle Silas's roof after their parents' deaths in a wagon accident. What had begun as occasional harsh words had devolved into violence that neither girl could withstand any longer. Hannah had made her decision when she found Emma sobbing in the barn that morning, another bruise blooming across her cheek. They fled into the darkness with only what they could carry: a small bundle of clothes, their mother's silver hairbrush, and the $47 Hannah had painstakingly saved from selling eggs and mending clothes in town. It wasn't much to start a new life, but it was better than staying at Crooked Pine Ranch another day. "He's coming," Emma gasped, her voice thin with fear as another shot cracked through the night. "Hannah, he's going to kill us." "Hush now," Hannah replied, pulling her sister deeper into the shadows of the pine trees that bordered their uncle's property. "We've got to reach the creek bed. Follow me and stay low." The girls scrambled down the rocky embankment, slipping on loose stones as they made their way to the shallow creek that cut across the eastern edge of the ranch. The cold water soaked through their boots as they splashed across, both girls gasping at the shock of it. Hannah paused on the opposite bank, squinting into the darkness. "This way," she said, gesturing toward a stand of cottonwoods. "We'll follow the creek north until we hit the old mining road. What if he tracks us?" Emma whispered, clutching her bundle of belongings tightly against her chest. Her face, illuminated briefly by moonlight, was as pale as bone china. "He won't," Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. "Not if we're careful." The sisters moved as swiftly as they could through the tangled undergrowth, branches scratching at their faces and snagging on their skirts. Behind them, they could still hear Silas's distant shouts, now joined by the baying of his hunting dogs. "He set the hounds on us," Emma choked out, panic rising in her voice. "Keep moving," Hannah ordered, yanking her sister forward. "We'll lose them at the creek crossings." They had covered perhaps 2 miles when disaster struck. Emma's foot caught on an exposed root, and she tumbled forward with a cry, landing hard on the rocky ground. Hannah rushed to help her up, but as Emma tried to stand, she collapsed back down with a gasp of pain. "My ankle," she moaned, clutching at it. "Hannah, I can't walk." Hannah felt a wave of desperation wash over her. The dogs were getting closer. She could hear their excited barks echoing through the night. She looked wildly around, searching for anything that might help them. "I'll carry you," she decided, though Emma had grown taller than her in the past year. "Put your arm around my neck." "You can't," Emma protested, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. "Leave me, get help." "I am not leaving you," Hannah said fiercely. "Now do as I say." Before Emma could argue further, a rustle in the trees behind them made both girls freeze. Hannah reached for the small paring knife tucked into her boot, their only weapon, and pushed Emma behind her. "Who's there?" she called, her voice stronger than she felt. "Show yourself." A tall figure emerged from the shadows, leading a dappled gray horse by the reins. In the moonlight, Hannah could make out the silhouette of a man broad-shouldered and lean, hipped in the way of those who spent their lives in the saddle. "Seems to me you ladies might be in a spot of trouble," he said, his voice low and rich as molasses. He tipped his hat back, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind with eyes that seemed to catch the moonlight. He couldn't have been more than 25. Hannah kept her knife raised. "Stay back, we don't need any help." The man's gaze dropped to Emma, who was still clutching her ankle, then lifted to the distant sound of dogs. His expression grew serious. "Those hounds say otherwise," he remarked. "Silas Bailey's dogs, if I'm not mistaken." Hannah stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I know most things that happen around these parts," he said simply. "Name's Zachary Porter. I work the line for the Circle M Ranch north of here." He nodded toward Emma. "Your sister can't run on that ankle, and those dogs will be on you before you make another mile." "What do you want?" Hannah demanded, not lowering her knife. Men like her uncle had taught her caution. Zachary Porter's mouth quirked up at one corner, but his eyes remained solemn. "Nothing at all, miss. Just offering assistance to two ladies in distress." "We're not," Hannah began, but Emma interrupted. "Please," she whispered. "Hannah, we need help." The baying of the hounds grew louder, and Hannah made her decision. She lowered the knife, though she kept it firmly in her grip. "What do you propose, Mr. Porter?" "Zach," he corrected. "And I propose getting you both out of here before those dogs and your uncle catch up." He gestured to his horse. "Maverick here can carry your sister. I'll cover your tracks." Hannah hesitated, weighing their limited options. "And why would you help us?" Something hardened in Zach's expression. "Let's just say I've got no love for men who raise their hands to women and children." The conviction in his voice persuaded Hannah more than any elaborate explanation could have. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Emma first," she said. Zach moved with surprising gentleness for such a large man, helping Emma onto his horse with minimal jostling to her injured ankle. Once she was settled, he turned to Hannah. "We need to move fast and quiet," he said. "I know these hills better than most. There's a place we can hole up until morning, then figure our next steps." "I don't want to involve you in our troubles," Hannah said, even as she walked alongside him, leading his horse with Emma mounted. Zach gave her a sidelong glance. "Too late for that, Miss Bailey." "Hannah," she corrected automatically. "And that's Emma." "Well, Hannah and Emma Bailey," he said, "your troubles just became mine." They moved swiftly through the darkness, Zach guiding them away from the creek and up into the rocky foothills. Every few minutes, he would stop and carefully obscure their trail, brushing away footprints or laying false leads. He even took off his bandana at one point, soaked it in creek water, and wiped down Maverick's hooves to minimize the tracks. "Learned this from an old Paiute tracker," he explained when he caught Hannah watching him. "Your uncle's good with those dogs, but even the best hound can be fooled if you know how." After an hour of careful travel, with the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them, they came to a small, hidden canyon tucked between two limestone ridges. A crude cabin was nestled against the back wall, nearly invisible among the juniper trees. "Line Rider's shelter," Zach explained. "Used it during roundup season last year. Nobody comes here much." He helped Emma down from the horse and carried her inside while Hannah hovered anxiously nearby. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a small stone fireplace, a narrow cot, and a rough-hewn table with two stools. "You ladies take the cot," Zach said, setting Emma down gently. "I'll keep watch." Hannah busied herself examining Emma's ankle, which was already swollen to twice its normal size. "I think it's just a bad sprain," she said with relief. "Nothing broken." Zach fetched water from a spring behind the cabin and tore a strip from a spare shirt to create a cold compress. Hannah watched him work, noting the efficient, careful movements of his hands. "Why are you really helping us?" she asked when Emma had dozed off, exhausted from their ordeal. Zach sat by the small fire he'd built, his profile strong against the flickering light. For a long moment he was silent, and Hannah thought he might not answer. "I had a sister once," he said finally, his voice so quiet she had to lean forward to hear him. "Catherine. She married young to a man who seemed decent enough. By the time we realized he wasn't, it was too late." Hannah's heart constricted. "I'm sorry." Zach nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy without meeting her eyes. "So when I see two young women running from a man like Silas Bailey in the middle of the night, I don't ask too many questions. I just help." Hannah studied him across the small space, this stranger who had risked himself for them with no expectation of reward. In the dancing firelight, she could see he was handsome in a rugged way, strong jaw dusted with stubble, straight nose, and eyes that seemed to hold more experience than his years warranted. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate. Zach finally looked at her, something unreadable passing through his expression. "Get some rest, Hannah Bailey. Tomorrow will be a long day." Hannah woke to pale dawn light filtering through the cabin's single window. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the night before came flooding back, and she sat up quickly, looking for Emma. Her sister was still asleep beside her, her face peaceful for the first time in months. Hannah gently brushed a strand of blonde hair from Emma's forehead, her heart aching with fierce protectiveness. The cabin door opened and Zach stepped inside, carrying a handful of wild onions and what looked like rabbit meat. His hair was damp, suggesting he'd washed at the spring, and he'd shaved the stubble from his jaw, revealing a small scar along his chin. "Morning," he said quietly, noticing Hannah was awake. "Thought you might be hungry." "You didn't have to hunt for us," Hannah said, carefully extracting herself from the cot without disturbing Emma. Zach shrugged. "Been up since before dawn anyway, went back to check if we were followed." Hannah felt a chill of fear. "And were we?" "No," he said, setting about preparing a simple breakfast. "Your uncle and his dogs headed east along the main creek. We're safe for now." Relief washed over Hannah, followed immediately by uncertainty. What happens next? She asked, more to herself than to him. Zach glanced up from his work. "That depends on where you're heading." The question caught Hannah off guard. In her desperation to escape, she hadn't thought much beyond getting away from Crooked Pine Ranch. "I don't know," she admitted. "We have a little money. I thought perhaps we could go to Sacramento or maybe even San Francisco. Find work as seamstresses or shop girls." Zach nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a fair distance, and your uncle will be watching the stage routes." "We could take the train from Belmont," Hannah suggested. "Sela's knows folks at the station," Zach countered. He hesitated, then added, "I could get you to Carson City. I've got business there in a few days anyway. From there, you could catch the westbound train without your uncle being the wiser." Hannah studied him, looking for any sign of deception, but found only straightforward concern. Still, she was cautious. "That's very kind, but we couldn't impose further." "It's not an imposition if I'm going that way anyhow," Zach said, turning the meat over the small fire he'd built. "And truth be told, I'd rest easier knowing you both got safely away from this territory." Emma stirred on the cot, blinking sleepily. "Hannah," she called. Hannah moved to her sister's side. "I'm here, Em. How's your ankle?" Emma winced as she shifted. "Better, I think. Still hurts, though." She looked past Hannah to where Zach was cooking. "Mr. Porter stayed with us all night," Hannah confirmed, "and he's offering to help us get to Carson City." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? You do that for us, Mr. Porter?" Zach smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "I told you it's Zach, and yes, I would. Carson City's got opportunities for smart young ladies looking to make their own way." Hannah helped Emma sit up, arranging their mother's old shawl around her shoulders. "We need to consider this carefully, Em. It's a long journey, and your ankle." "We'll heal along the way," Emma said firmly. "Hannah, we can't go back, and we can't stay here forever." Hannah knew her sister was right. They had limited options and even more limited resources. Zach Porter represented their best chance at a clean escape. "All right," she decided. If Zach is willing to guide us to Carson City, we accept with gratitude." Zach nodded, his expression serious again. "We should rest here today. Give your ankle a chance to improve, Emma. We'll leave at first light tomorrow." The day passed in quiet preparation. Zach repaired a tear in Emma's boot, while Hannah fashioned a proper bandage for her ankle from strips of cloth. They inventoried their meager supplies and discussed the route ahead. Zach revealed he knew of several safe places they could stop along the way, abandoned mining cabins and friendly homesteaders who owed him favors. As night fell, Hannah found herself standing outside the cabin, staring up at the vast canopy of stars. The enormity of what they were attempting, leaving everything behind, starting fresh in a new city with no connections or references, suddenly overwhelmed her. Having second thoughts, Zach's voice came from behind her. Hannah didn't turn. "Not about leaving, just wondering if we can really make it." Zach moved to stand beside her, his gaze following hers to the stars. "My mother used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about being afraid and doing what needs doing anyway." Your mother sounds wise. She was, he said, and Hannah heard the past tense. Another loss like her parents, like his sister. Does it get easier? She asked. Moving forward after everything changes, Zach considered this. Not easier, different, you build something new on top of what was lost. It's never the same, but eventually it becomes enough. Hannah nodded, finding unexpected comfort in his words. They stood in companionable silence for several minutes, the night air cool around them. "Thank you," she said finally. "Not just for helping us escape, but for this. For treating us like we matter." Zach turned to look at her then, his expression serious in the moonlight. "You do matter, Hannah Bailey. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Hannah felt her cheeks warm and she looked away first. "We should get some rest," she murmured. "Long day tomorrow." Zach cleared his throat. "Yes, we should." As Hannah settled beside Emma on the narrow cot that night, she found herself thinking of Zach Porter's steady gaze and the way he'd said her name. It was foolish to dwell on such things, she told herself firmly. Their situation was precarious enough, without complicating it with inappropriate feelings for the man helping them escape. Still, as sleep claimed her, Hannah couldn't help but feel that in running from one life, she might have inadvertently stumbled into another one she hadn't even known to hope for. They departed the line rider's cabin before dawn, Emma riding Maverick, while Hannah and Zach walked alongside. Emma's ankle was still tender, but the swelling had reduced enough that she could put some weight on it if necessary. "We'll follow the ridge for about 5 miles, Zach explained as they set out, then cut west through Juniper Pass. "There's a homestead there where we can rest for the night," old couple named Winters. "They'll give us a hot meal and ask no questions." "You seem to know a lot of people willing to help strangers," Hannah observed, adjusting her shawl against the morning chill. Zach smiled slightly. "The West runs on favors owed and paid. I've pulled my share of folks out of trouble over the years." "What sort of trouble finds you, Zach Porter?" Hannah asked, curious about this man who had so readily come to their aid. He was quiet for a moment, leading the horse around a rocky outcropping. "The usual kind. Bar fights, claim jumpers, the occasional rustler, nothing too exciting." But there was something in his tone that suggested he was downplaying his experiences. Hannah studied his profile, wondering about the stories he wasn't telling. They traveled steadily through the day, Zach frequently doubling back to check for pursuit and obscure their trail. By mid-afternoon, Emma was dozing in the saddle, exhausted despite having ridden the whole way. "We should stop," Hannah said, concerned. "She's not used to this kind of journey." Zach nodded. "There's a spring about a half-mile ahead. We can rest there for a bit." The spring bubbled up from between a cluster of rocks, creating a small pool of clear water surrounded by lush grass, a rare oasis in the otherwise dry landscape. Zach helped Emma down from the horse and settled her in a shady spot while Hannah bathed her sister's face with cool water. "How much farther to the Winters homestead?" Hannah asked as Zach refilled their canteens. "Another 3 hours at this pace," he replied. "We'll make it before sundown." Hannah glanced at Emma, who was already looking better for the brief rest. "I'm sorry we're slowing you down." Zach shook his head. "You're doing fine, better than most city folks would in these conditions." "We're not city folks," Hannah said, a touch defensively. "We were raised on a ranch, same as you, I expect." Zach raised an eyebrow. "Is that right? What sort of ranch work did Silas have you doing?" Hannah straightened. "Everything. I can mend fences, deliver calves, break horses." Zach interrupted, a hint of skepticism in his voice. "I've gentled 3 colts," Hannah said proudly, "and I can ride as well as any hand on the crooked pine." A slow smile spread across Zach's face. "I believe you," he said, and to Hannah's surprise, he sounded sincere. "That explains why you're handling this journey so well." Hannah felt oddly pleased by his assessment. "Our parents believed girls should learn the same skills as boys. Our father always said capability has no gender." "Your father sounds like he was a smart man." "He was," Hannah said softly. The grief, though 3 years old, still felt fresh at times. "He would have hated knowing we ended up with Uncle Silas." Zach's expression darkened. "How did that come about, if you don't mind my asking?" Hannah sighed, settling more comfortably on the grass. "Our parents were traveling to San Francisco for their 20th wedding anniversary. There was an accident. The stagecoach went off the road during a storm. Silas was our only living relative." "I'm sorry," Zach said simply. Hannah nodded, accepting his sympathy. It wasn't so bad at first. Sila's was distant but not cruel. Then his mine investments failed and he started drinking more heavily. After that, his temper grew worse each month. And no one in town stepped in, Zach asked, a hard edge to his voice. Hannah gave a bitter laugh. Sila's is well respected in Belmont, a founding family. Who would take the word of two orphaned girls over his? Zach's jaw tightened. I've known men like your uncle. They're all charm in public and monsters behind closed doors. Yes, Hannah agreed quietly. That's exactly what he is. They fell silent, the only sound the gentle bubbling of the spring and the soft whicker of Maverick as he grazed nearby. Emma had fallen asleep again, her face peaceful in the dappled shade. We should move on soon, Zach said eventually. The Winters will be expecting us. Hannah looked at him in surprise. You sent word ahead. No need, Zach replied, standing and brushing dust from his trousers. Martha Winters claims she can sense when company's coming. Strangest thing is, she's usually right. By the time they reached the Winters' homestead, the sun was sinking below the western mountains, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and purple. The homestead itself was modest, but well kept, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the stone chimney, a tidy barn, and a small corral where 2 horses and a milk cow grazed contentedly. As Zach had predicted, Martha Winters was waiting on the porch, her silver hair gleaming in the fading light. Beside her stood a tall, lean man who could only be her husband. Right on time, Zachary Porter, Martha called as they approached. I put the stew on an hour ago. Zach tipped his hat to her, a genuine smile warming his features. Mrs. Winters, your intuition remains unmatched. And you've brought guests, Martha observed, her keen eyes taking in the 2 sisters. Friends who need a safe place for the night, Zach explained simply. Martha nodded, asking no further questions. Well, any friends of Zach's are welcome here. Come inside, girls. You look done in. The interior of the cabin was warm and inviting, with handmade quilts draped over sturdy furniture and the savory smell of cooking food filling the air. Hannah and Emma were shown to a small bedroom off the main living area where they could wash and change into clean clothes from their meager bundles. Those men's shirts hanging by the door, Martha said before leaving them. They belong to our son. He's out in California now. You're welcome to them if you need something fresh. Hannah thanked her, touched by the woman's generosity. Once Martha had gone, Emma sank onto the bed with a sigh of relief. They seem kind, she whispered. Hannah nodded, helping Emma out of her dusty dress. Zach knows good people. Zach, Emma repeated with a small smile. You're calling him by his first name now? Hannah felt her cheeks warm. It's what he asked us to call him. MMM, Emma hummed, her tone knowing. And you never blush when you say it. Hush, Hannah scolded, though without heat. He's helping us escape, nothing more. Emma's smile widened. I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. That's definitely something more. Hannah busied herself with pouring fresh water into the basin, hoping her sister wouldn't notice her deepening blush. You're imagining things. Now wash your face before dinner. But as they joined the others at the table a short while later, Hannah couldn't help but be aware of Zach's presence across from her, the way his hands moved as he talked. The deep timbre of his laugh when Josiah Winters told a particularly amusing story about a stubborn mule, the warmth in his eyes when they occasionally met hers. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair: venison stew, cornbread, and preserved peaches. The conversation flowed easily, with Martha and Josiah sharing tales of their 40 years together in the Nevada wilderness. This land wasn't even a territory when we first settled here, Josiah recalled, breaking off another piece of cornbread. Just open country as far as the eye could see. Must have been lonely, Emma commented, looking more relaxed than she had in days. Martha shook her head. Never lonely when you've got the right company, she said, sharing a fond look with her husband. One good person is worth more than 100 acquaintances. Hannah felt Zach's gaze on her but didn't look up, suddenly intensely interested in her stew. After dinner, Josiah took Zach out to the barn to check on Maverick, while Hannah helped Martha with the dishes. Emma, her ankles still tender, had been installed in a comfortable chair by the fire with some mending to keep her hands busy. He's a good man, that Zachary Porter, Martha said as she and Hannah worked side by side at the wash basin. Hannah nodded noncommittally. He's been very kind to us. Martha gave her a sideways glance. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His father worked the same ranch as my Josiah before starting his own place. That boy's had more than his share of heartache, but it never made him hard. That's rare in a man. Hannah couldn't help her curiosity. What sort of heartache? Martha sighed, her weathered hands moving deftly as she dried a plate. Lost his parents to influenza when he was 16. His sister Catherine to a bad husband a few years later. Then the war came and took his brother Thomas at Gettysburg. Hannah's chest tightened at the litany of losses. Yet he still stops to help strangers. That's just his way, Martha said with a fond smile, always looking out for others before himself. She paused, studying Hannah more closely. You're running from something, I expect. Don't worry, she added when Hannah tensed. I'm not asking what or who. Just know that if Zach Porter has taken it upon himself to see you safely away, then you couldn't be in better hands. Hannah relaxed slightly. Thank you for not asking questions. Everyone deserves a fresh start, Martha said simply. Josiah and I had our own reasons for coming west all those years ago. The past stays where it belongs behind us. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep in the small bedroom, Hannah slipped outside, needing a moment alone with her thoughts. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. She breathed deeply, savoring the clean, sage-scented air. Couldn't sleep. Zach's voice came from the darkness. Hannah turned to find him leaning against the corral fence, his face half illuminated by moonlight. Just thinking, she said, moving to stand beside him. Everything's happening so fast. 3 days ago, I was darning Uncle Silas's socks and planning our escape in secret. Now we're halfway to Carson City with a complete stranger. Do I still feel like a stranger? Zach asked quietly. Hannah considered this. No, she admitted, and that's what's strange. I've known you barely 2 days, yet I trust you more than people I've known for years. Trust is earned in actions, not time, Zach said. He shifted slightly, turning toward her. I want you to know something, Hannah. Once we reach Carson City, if you and Emma decide you'd rather find your own way from there, I'll understand. No obligations. Hannah studied his face in the moonlight. Are you trying to be rid of us, Zach Porter? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Quite the opposite. But I don't want you feeling beholden. We are beholden, Hannah said seriously. You saved us when you had no reason to involve yourself. There are always reasons, Zach replied, his voice low, some more complicated than others. Hannah felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the night air. Such as, Zach seemed to struggle with himself for a moment, then he straightened, his expression resolute. Hannah, I need to tell you something about your uncle. Hannah tensed. What about him? The real reason I helped you that night, Zach began, then hesitated. I knew who you were running from before you ever said his name. How? Hannah asked, confusion and wariness mingling inside her. Zach sighed heavily. Silas Bailey and I have history, bad history. He was partners with my father in a mining venture years ago. When the claim started producing, Silas had my father's name struck from the records. Claimed he'd sold his share, produced paperwork my father swore he never signed. Hannah felt sick. That sounds like Uncle Silas. The court battle ruined my father financially, Zach continued, his voice tight with old anger. He lost everything except our small ranch. The stress of it weakened him before the influenza hit. When I saw you two running from his property that night, I knew instantly who you were fleeing from and why. So you helped us for revenge, Hannah said, taking a step back, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. Zach's head snapped up. No, God, no, Hannah. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but insistent. I helped you because I couldn't bear to see 2 more lives destroyed by that man. My quarrel with Silas Bailey has nothing to do with you and Emma. Hannah searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. She found only earnest concern and something else, something warmer that made her pulse quicken. You should have told me sooner, she said, but there was no accusation in her voice. I know, Zach acknowledged. I was afraid you'd think my motives weren't pure. That I was using you somehow in my grudge against your uncle. And are you? Hannah asked directly, needing to hear his answer. No, Zach said firmly. I want nothing more than to see you and Emma safe with a chance at the life you deserve. If I never cross paths with Silas Bailey again, it would be too soon. Hannah believed him. Against all reason and caution, she believed this man she had known for such a short time. She felt his hand still holding hers and realized she hadn't pulled away. Thank you for telling me the truth, she said softly. Zach's eyes held hers. I won't keep things from you again, Hannah. You've had enough secrets and lies in your life. The promise in those words, the steadiness of his gaze, stirred something in Hannah that she had thought long buried hope, perhaps. Or something even more dangerous. Before she could respond, the cabin door opened, spilling warm light into the yard. Martha stood silhouetted in the doorway. It's getting chilly out there, she called. Best come in before you catch your deaths. The moment broken, Hannah gently withdrew her hand from Zach's. We should go in, she murmured. Zach nodded, but as they walked toward the cabin, he spoke quietly. We're not finished with this conversation, Hannah Bailey. And despite herself, Hannah was glad of it. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. After a hearty breakfast of flapjacks and bacon, the trio bid farewell to the Winters, who pressed a bundle of food and a spare blanket into Hannah's hands despite her protests. You'll need these more than we will, Martha insisted, giving Hannah a warm hug. And remember, if you ever need a place to land, our door is open. Hannah blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you for everything. As they set off, Emma's ankle was much improved, allowing her to walk for short stretches while Zach led Maverick. The terrain grew rougher as they left the Winters' homestead behind, climbing into pine-covered foothills. Carson City is still 3 days' journey if we keep a steady pace, Zach explained. We'll need to be especially careful the next day or so. We're crossing into territory where your uncle might have connections. Hannah nodded, watchful as she helped Emma over a fallen log. Has there been any sign of pursuit? Nothing fresh, Zach said, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. But Silas isn't a man to give up easily. They traveled in companionable silence for much of the morning, Emma occasionally asking questions about the plants and animals they encountered. Zach answered with patient knowledge, clearly familiar with every aspect of the landscape. By midday, they stopped in a small clearing for a rest and to share some of Martha's provisions. Emma dozed off almost immediately after eating, exhausted from the morning's exertion. Hannah arranged her sister's shawl more comfortably around her shoulders before joining Zach at the edge of the clearing. She's getting stronger, Hannah observed. Zach nodded. She's tougher than she looks. You both are. Hannah smiled slightly. Bailey women have always been resilient. Our mother used to say hardship is just opportunity wearing a disguise. Wise woman, Zach commented, offering Hannah a strip of jerky. What was she like, your mother? Hannah accepted the jerky, her eyes growing distant with memory. Beautiful, strong. She could quote Shakespeare while mending a fence and never miss a stitch or a word. She loved fiercely and laughed often. She sighed. Emma has her gentleness, I have her stubbornness. Both valuable qualities, Zach said, and your parents. Hannah asked, curious about the people who had raised such a man. Zach's expression softened. My father was quiet but fair, never raised his voice, never needed to. When he gave his word, it was as good as done. My mother was the dreamer between them, always seeing possibilities where others saw problems. They sound wonderful, Hannah said. They were. Zach was quiet for a moment, then added, they would have liked you. The simple statement sent warmth spreading through Hannah's chest. Before she could respond, a distant sound caught their attention, the rhythmic pounding of hooves on hard-packed earth. Zach was on his feet instantly, his expression alert. Riders, coming fast. Hannah rushed to Emma, shaking her awake. Em, we need to move, now. Emma blinked groggily but responded to the urgency in her sister's voice, scrambling to her feet with only a slight wince as she put weight on her injured ankle. This way, Zach said tersely, leading Maverick deeper into the trees. Stay low and quiet. They moved swiftly through the underbrush, Zach helping Emma when necessary. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest as they climbed higher into the rocky terrain, the sounds of the approaching riders growing louder. "Here," Zach whispered, guiding them into a narrow ravine partially hidden by a cluster of junipers. "Stay with Maverick, don't make a sound." "Where are you going?" Hannah hissed, grabbing his arm. "To see who's following," Zach replied, gently disengaging her grip. "I'll be right back." Before Hannah could protest further, he melted into the rocks with the silent efficiency of a mountain lion. She pulled Emma close, both of them huddled beside the patient horse, straining to hear what was happening. Long minutes passed. The sound of horses grew louder, then stopped. Male voices carried faintly on the breeze, too distant to make out words. Hannah felt Emma trembling against her and tightened her arm around her sister's shoulders. "It will be all right," she whispered, with more confidence than she felt. Finally, the voices faded and the sound of horses resumed, growing fainter. Still, Zach didn't return. Hannah's anxiety increased with each passing minute. "Should we go look for him?" Emma asked in a small voice. Hannah hesitated. "No, he told us to stay here. We have to trust him." Just as the words left her mouth, a scrabble of pebbles announced Zach's return. His expression was grim as he dropped into a crouch beside them. "4 riders," he reported quietly. "2 of Silas's ranch hands, a tracker, and your uncle himself." Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. "He's leading the search himself," Zach nodded. "He's determined, I'll give him that. They were following our trail from the Winters' place." "Oh God," Hannah breathed. "Martha and Josiah will be fine," Zach assured her. "The Winters know how to handle men like Silas, but we need to move." They're heading east now. The tracker thinks we're trying for the pass to Ruby Valley. "But we're going west to Carson City," Emma said, confused. Zach's mouth curved in a tight smile. "Exactly. I left some false signs yesterday, dropped a handkerchief with EB. Stitched in the corner near the Eastern Trail. Your uncle took the bait." Hannah stared at him in amazement. "You planned for this." "I hoped it wouldn't be necessary," Zach admitted. "But yes, I left a few misleading trails just in case." Relief washed over Hannah, followed swiftly by admiration. "You're quite remarkable, Zachary Porter." Something flashed in his eyes, pleasure at her praise, perhaps before he turned businesslike again. "We should keep moving. We've got a long way to go before nightfall, and we need to put as much distance between us and those riders as possible." They pushed hard through the afternoon, following game trails and rocky outcroppings that left minimal tracks. Emma rode Maverick most of the way, her ankles still not strong enough for sustained hiking over difficult terrain. By sunset, they had covered impressive ground, descending into a narrow valley Hannah didn't recognize. "Where are we?" she asked as Zach finally called a halt near a shallow stream. "Coyote Valley," he replied, helping Emma down from the horse. "Not many people come this way. There's a line shack about a mile ahead where we can spend the night." The line shack proved to be little more than a crude shelter, 4 walls, a roof, and a small stone fireplace, but it was clean and dry. Zach built a small fire while Hannah tended to Emma, whose ankle had swollen again from the day's journey. "I'm sorry I'm slowing us down," Emma said miserably as Hannah bathed the inflamed joint with cool water from the stream. "Don't be ridiculous," Hannah chided gently. "You're doing wonderfully. Besides, according to Zach, we've thrown Uncle Silas off our trail completely. We can afford to take our time now." Zach returned with more firewood, catching the end of their conversation. "Your sister's right, Emma. You're making good progress, especially considering your injury." He set the wood aside and knelt to examine her ankle. "May I?" Emma nodded, and he gently probed the swollen area with experienced fingers. "The swelling's mostly from use, not damage," he diagnosed. "Keep it elevated tonight and it should be better by morning." Hannah watched as he fashioned a small pillow from his rolled-up jacket, placing it carefully under Emma's foot. There was such tenderness in his actions, such consideration for her sister's comfort, that Hannah felt a tightening in her chest. As they shared a simple dinner of jerky, hard biscuits, and dried fruit from Martha's provisions, Emma yawned repeatedly, the day's exertions clearly catching up with her. "You should sleep," Hannah told her. "We'll need to start early tomorrow." Emma didn't argue, settling herself on the rough plank floor near the fire, using the winter's blanket as a cushion. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into sleep. Hannah and Zach sat in companionable silence, the crackling fire casting dancing shadows across the small space. Outside, an owl called, its mournful cry echoing through the darkness. "When we reach Carson City," Hannah said finally. "What will you do?" Zach poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I have business at the land office after that." He shrugged. "Back to the Circle M, I suppose. Spring roundup starts soon." Hannah nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling that opened inside her at the thought of parting ways. "Of course, you have your own life to get back to." Zach was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the flames. "Unless I had a reason to do otherwise," he said finally, his voice low, Hannah's breath caught. "What sort of reason?" Zach set aside the stick and turned to face her fully. In the firelight, his features were cast in gold and shadow, his eyes dark and serious. "Hannah," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "These past few days, I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel a sudden noise outside cut him off, the unmistakable sound of a horse's whinny, followed by the soft crunch of boots on gravel." Zach was on his feet in an instant, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. "Stay with Emma," he whispered urgently, "and douse the fire." Heart racing, Hannah scrambled to her sister's side while Zach moved silently to the door. He peered through a crack in the rough boards, his body tense with alertness. "One rider," he reported quietly. "Coming this way." Hannah shook Emma awake, pressing a finger to her lips to indicate silence. Emma's eyes widened in fear, but she nodded her understanding. Outside, the horse drew closer. Hannah could hear the jingle of tack and the steady breathing of the animal, then a voice called out, a woman's voice, unexpected in the wilderness. "Hello, the cabin. I know someone's in there. I can smell your fire. I don't mean any harm." Zach frowned, clearly not recognizing the voice. He motioned for Hannah and Emma to stay back as he cracked the door open, his gun ready but out of sight. "State your business," he called firmly. "Just looking for shelter for the night," the woman replied. "My horse threw a shoe a few miles back, and I've been walking ever since. Saw your firelight and hoped for company." Zach hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. After a moment, he opened the door wider, allowing Hannah to see their unexpected visitor. She was a striking woman in her 30s, dressed in practical riding clothes, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was a confidence in her stance that suggested she was accustomed to handling herself in difficult situations. "Name's Rebecca Thornton," she said, nodding respectfully to Zach. "I'm the new school teacher for Pine Creek, was supposed to arrive yesterday, but as you can see, I've had some difficulties." Zach relaxed slightly, though he remained watchful. "Pine Creek's a good 20 miles northwest of here." "You're far off the main road," Rebecca sighed, fatigue evident in her face. "I know, took what I thought was a shortcut. Clearly, I was mistaken." Hannah stepped forward, her natural compassion overriding caution. "You must be exhausted, Miss Thornton. Please come in and warm yourself." Zach shot Hannah a warning glance, but didn't object as Rebecca led her limping horse to the small lean-to attached to the cabin where Maverick was already tethered. "Thank you," Rebecca said gratefully as she entered the cabin. Her sharp eyes took in the Spartan surroundings and the three occupants. "I hope I'm not intruding on a family journey." "We're not," Hannah began, but Zach cut her off. "Just passing through, same as you," he said neutrally. "Heading to Carson City." Rebecca accepted this with a nod, settling herself near the fire with a weary sigh. "I don't suppose you have any coffee?" she asked hopefully. Emma, who had remained quiet until now, offered a small smile. "No coffee, I'm afraid, but we have some tea Mrs. Winters packed for us." As Emma busied herself preparing the tea, Hannah observed their unexpected guest more closely. There was something about Rebecca Thornton that didn't quite fit her story. Her hands were too soft for someone accustomed to hard travel, and beneath her dusty clothes, Hannah could see the fine quality of the fabric. Zach had noticed too, judging by the way he positioned himself between the woman and the sisters, his posture casual but ready. "What brings you to Pine Creek, Miss Thornton?" he asked conversationally. "It's a small town for someone with your polish. Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly at his perception. I could ask what brings such a varied group to this remote line shack, she countered smoothly, accepting the cup of tea Emma offered, but I was raised not to pry into others' affairs. An awkward silence fell. Hannah glanced at Zach, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head, warning her not to volunteer information. Rebecca sipped her tea, her gaze moving thoughtfully between them. Finally, she set down her cup with a decisive motion. "Let me be direct," she said. "You're clearly running from something or someone. I recognize the signs because I've been there myself." She turned to Hannah and Emma. "Sisters, I'd wager, fleeing a bad situation. And you," she added, addressing Zach, "are helping them, though whether out of kindness or personal interest, I couldn't say." Hannah felt her face drain of color. Beside her, Emma stiffened. Zach's hand moved closer to his gun. "You seem to have quite an imagination, Miss Thornton." Rebecca shook her head. "Not imagination, experience. 10 years ago, I fled an abusive husband with nothing but the clothes on my back. A stranger helped me then, asking nothing in return. I've never forgotten that kindness." Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. Hannah found herself believing the woman despite her initial suspicions. "Our uncle," Emma said suddenly, ignoring Hannah's warning glance. "We're running from our uncle." Rebecca nodded, unsurprised. "Family is often the most dangerous enemy. They know all your hiding places." "Emma," Hannah said sharply, "we don't know Miss Thornton." "No, you don't," Rebecca agreed calmly, "and you're wise to be cautious, but I give you my word, I mean you no harm. In fact, I may be able to help." Zach's expression remained skeptical. "How exactly would you do that?" "Information," Rebecca replied simply. "I passed a group of riders earlier today, 4 men, 1 older, 3 younger. They were asking everyone they met if they'd seen 2 young women traveling alone." Hannah's heart sank. "That would be our uncle and his men." "I gathered as much," Rebecca said. "They were headed east toward Ruby Valley, seemed quite determined." Zach exchanged a glance with Hannah, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Then our diversion worked. For now," Rebecca cautioned, "but men like that don't give up easily. If you're heading to Carson City, you should know they've posted men at the stage depot and the train station. I overheard them planning it." This new information hit Hannah like a physical blow. Their carefully laid escape plan suddenly seemed much more precarious. "How do you know all this?" Zach demanded, suspicion evident in his voice. Rebecca met his gaze steadily. "Because they stopped me on the road and questioned me, same as everyone else they encountered. I'm observant and I listen. Old habits from my own days on the run." Hannah believed her. Something in the woman's direct gaze spoke of shared experience, of understanding what it meant to flee in fear. "If what you say is true," Hannah said slowly, "how are we supposed to get out of the territory? Uncle Silas knows everyone in Belmont, and now he's watching Carson City too." Rebecca considered this. There are other ways out of Nevada, smaller towns with stage connections to California. It would take longer, but you might avoid detection. Zach shook his head. "Too risky." "If Silas Bailey is determined enough to post watchers in Carson City, he'll think of the outlying routes too." A tense silence fell as they all considered the problem. Finally, Emma spoke up, her voice tentative. "What if we didn't try to leave Nevada right away?" she suggested. "What if we found somewhere to stay for a while, a place Uncle Silas wouldn't think to look?" Hannah frowned. "Like where? We don't know anyone here except the Winters, and that's the first place he'd check." "Pine Creek," Rebecca said suddenly. "It's a small mining town, mostly Swedish immigrants. Very close-knit community. They don't take kindly to outsiders causing trouble, and they look after their own." Zach looked thoughtful. "I've heard of it. Isolated place up in the Toyab Range." Rebecca nodded. "The town needs a seamstress badly. The miners' wives have been making do with poor quality work from an old man with failing eyesight, if you have such skills." "We do," Hannah confirmed. "Our mother taught us both." "Then you could find work there, establish yourselves, at least until the search dies down," Rebecca suggested. "The town council hired me without much questioning. They're desperate for educated people willing to live so remotely." Hannah exchanged a long look with Emma. It wasn't what they had planned. They'd dreamed of San Francisco, of a fresh start in a big city where no one knew them, but it might be their best option given the circumstances. "What do you think?" she asked her sister softly. Emma bit her lip. "It sounds safer than trying to slip past Uncle Silas's men, and it's just temporary, right? Until we can move on without fear." Hannah turned to Zach. "And you, what's your opinion?" Zach was quiet for a moment, considering. Pine Creek is even farther from Belmont than Carson City. More isolated, harder to find, and a small community might offer better protection than anonymity in a larger town. He looked at Rebecca. "Assuming Miss Thornton is being honest with us." Rebecca met his skeptical gaze evenly. "I understand your caution, Mr. Porter," he supplied after a brief hesitation. "Mr. Porter, I have no way to prove my trustworthiness except to say that I know what these young women are going through. I was helped when I needed it most, and I've tried to live my life paying that forward ever since." There was such sincerity in her voice that even Zach seemed moved. After a moment, he nodded. "I believe you," he said simply, "and I think your suggestion has merit." Hannah felt a wave of both relief and anxiety, "So we change our destination to Pine Creek." "It seems the wisest course," Zach agreed, "at least for now." Emma yawned, the excitement of their planning session giving way to exhaustion. Hannah noticed and immediately shifted into her protective role. "We should all get some rest," she said firmly. "We can discuss details in the morning." Rebecca nodded, moving to make herself comfortable on the opposite side of the fire from Emma. "Thank you for sharing your shelter," she said, "and for trusting me even a little." As they settled for the night, Hannah found herself beside Zach near the door, both of them instinctively positioning themselves between their companions and any potential threat from outside. "You really trust her?" Hannah whispered once the others appeared to be sleeping. Zach considered the question. "I think she's telling the truth about running from someone herself. The rest," he shrugged, "we'll see, but having a local guide to Pine Creek could be valuable." Hannah nodded, drawing her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the night chill. "I hope we're making the right decision. We're keeping you and Emma safe," Zach said quietly. "That's what matters most." His words warmed her more than any blanket could have. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." In the dim light of the dying fire, she could just make out his profile as he turned toward her. "I meant what I started to say earlier, Hannah. These days with you and Emma, they've come to mean something to me." Hannah's heart quickened. "To me as well." Zach's hand found hers in the darkness, his touch gentle but sure. "Whatever comes next, I want you to know I'll see you safely through it. Both of you." Hannah curled her fingers around his, the simple contact sending warmth spiraling through her. "I believe you," she whispered. And as she drifted toward sleep, her hand still held in his, Hannah realized that for the first time since her parents' death, she felt truly safe. The journey to Pine Creek took 3 more days, their pace slowed by Emma's healing ankle and the need for caution. Rebecca Thornton proved to be an unexpected blessing. Her knowledge of the terrain and local customs filled in gaps even Zach hadn't known. The town was founded by a group of Swedish miners who struck silver in '68, she explained as they made their way along a narrow mountain trail. "They keep to themselves mostly, but they're good people. Hard-working, honest. And they won't ask too many questions about 2 sisters arriving suddenly with few possessions," Hannah asked, helping Emma over a particularly steep section of path. Rebecca smiled. "They might ask, but they won't pry if you make it clear the subject is painful. Many of them have their own stories of hardship and new beginnings." Zach rode ahead most of the time, scouting the trail and watching for any sign of pursuit. Though they had seen no evidence of Silas or his men since that first encounter, none of them were willing to take chances. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a ridge and looked down into a narrow valley nestled between towering pine-covered mountains. A small cluster of buildings huddled along a swift-flowing creek, smoke rising from stone chimneys into the clear mountain air. "Pine Creek," Rebecca announced with evident satisfaction. "Population 112-13 now with my arrival." "It's smaller than I imagined," Emma commented, shading her eyes against the late afternoon sun. "But defensible," Zach noted approvingly, surveying the single road that wound down from their vantage point into the town. Anyone coming in would be spotted well before they arrived. They descended slowly, giving the town time to notice their approach. By the time they reached the main street, really just a wider section of the dirt road that ran through the settlement, several people had gathered to watch their arrival. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a magnificent white beard stepped forward as they drew near. "Miss Thornton," he greeted Rebecca with a slight Swedish accent. "We had begun to worry." "Mr. Lindstrom," Rebecca replied with a polite nod. "I apologize for my delay. I encountered some difficulties on the road." The man's pale blue eyes moved to Hannah, Emma, and Zach with undisguised curiosity. "And you have brought friends?" "Fellow travelers who were kind enough to assist me when my horse came up lame," Rebecca explained smoothly. "May I present the Bailey sisters, Hannah and Emma, and Mr. Zachary Porter?" Lindstrom studied them for a moment, then gave a short nod. "Any friend of our new teacher is welcome in Pine Creek. I am Lars Lindstrom, Town Council Chairman." More introductions followed as other townspeople stepped forward, the storekeeper and his wife, the blacksmith, the minister, and his family. Hannah was struck by how genuinely friendly they all seemed, despite their initial reserve. "The sisters are skilled seamstresses," Rebecca mentioned during a lull in the conversation. "I understand your community has need of such talents." This announcement caused a stir of interest among the women present, a plump, rosy-cheeked woman who had been introduced as Mrs. Bergman stepped forward eagerly. "Truly, you can make dresses, alter garments?" she asked in accented English. Hannah nodded, sensing an opportunity. "Yes, madam, we were trained by our mother who learned her craft in Philadelphia. And fine embroidery too," Emma added shyly. "Delicate work on linens and such." The women exchanged excited glances, and Hannah caught snippets of Swedish as they conferred among themselves. "There is a small cabin at the edge of town," Mrs. Bergman announced finally. "It has been empty since old Mr. Jensen passed last winter. It would need some cleaning, but it could be suitable for 2 young ladies." "Yes." Hannah felt hope rising within her. "That sounds perfect. We can pay rent, of course." "Perhaps an arrangement could be made," Lars Lindstrom suggested. "Reduced rent in exchange for sewing services for the community." Before Hannah could respond, Zach stepped forward. "The sisters will pay fair market value," he said firmly. "They don't seek charity, only opportunity." Hannah shot him a grateful look, touched by his defense of their dignity. Lindstrom's bushy eyebrows rose, but he nodded with what seemed like approval. "As you wish. Mrs. Bergman will show you the cabin. If it is satisfactory, we can discuss terms." As the crowd began to disperse, Zach touched Hannah's elbow lightly. "I need to see to Maverick and make arrangements for my own lodging," he said. "Will you be all right?" Hannah nodded, suddenly reluctant to be parted from him even briefly. "Of course, we'll be fine with Mrs. Bergman." Zach hesitated, then said in a lower voice, "I still need to finish our conversation, Hannah. When you're settled," her heart skipped. "Yes, I'd like that." With a tip of his hat, he led his horse toward the small livery stable, leaving Hannah to follow Mrs. Bergman and Emma toward their potential new home. The cabin proved to be better than Hannah had dared hope, a sturdy one-room structure with a stone fireplace, solid wooden floors, and 2 windows that let in ample light. It was dusty from disuse, but the roof appeared sound and the walls were well chinked against the mountain winds. "It's not much," Mrs. Bergman said apologetically as Hannah and Emma explored the small space, "but with some cleaning and a woman's touch." "It's perfect," Emma declared, her face alight with excitement. "Our own place, Hannah." Hannah felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. After all they had endured, they finally had a place to call their own, however humble. "We'll take it," she told Mrs. Bergman decisively. "And we'll start work as soon as we're settled." Word spread quickly through the small community. By nightfall, the cabin had been swept and scrubbed by a group of women who descended with brooms and rags, bringing with them spare linens, a few pieces of serviceable furniture, and enough food to feed the sisters for several days. "The women of Pine Creek take care of each other," explained Ingrid Nilsson, the storekeeper's wife, as she helped Hannah make up the single bed they would share. It is our way. Hannah was overwhelmed by the generosity. We'll repay every kindness, she promised. Ingrid waved away her words. Just make us beautiful dresses for summer festival, she said with a laugh. Many of us have worn the same clothes for too many years. By the time the last helper had departed, promising to return in the morning with more supplies, Hannah and Emma were alone in their new home. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the clean, if faded quilt someone had donated. "Do you think we'll be safe here, truly?" she asked, voicing the question that had lingered unspoken between them. Hannah sat beside her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "I believe so. It's remote, and these people seem protective of their own. If we work hard and fit in, I think we could make a real home here." "For how long?" Hannah sighed, considering. "I don't know, maybe a few months, until we're sure Uncle Silas has given up the search. Maybe longer if we find we belong here." Emma leaned her head against Hannah's shoulder. "I like it already. It feels peaceful." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Hannah rose to answer it, unsurprised to find Zach standing there, hat in hand. "May I come in?" he asked. Hannah stepped back, gesturing him inside. "Of course, we were just talking about how kind everyone has been." Zach entered, his tall frame making the small cabin seem even smaller. He nodded to Emma, then turned to Hannah. "I've secured a room at the boarding house," he said. "And I've spoken with the blacksmith about some work repairing tack and shoeing horses. He's agreed to take me on temporarily." Hannah blinked in surprise. "You're staying in Pine Creek?" Something vulnerable flickered across Zach's face. "If that's acceptable to you, I thought. Given the circumstances, it might be wise to remain nearby, at least until you're properly settled." Emma rose from the bed, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "I just realized I haven't properly thanked Mrs. Bergman for the bread she brought. I should do that before it gets too late." Before Hannah could protest, Emma had slipped out the door, leaving her alone with Zach. A charged silence filled the small space. "Your sister isn't particularly subtle," Zach observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "No, subtlety has never been Emma's strong suit." Zach took a step closer, his expression growing serious. "Hannah, these past days, traveling with you and Emma, protecting you, getting to know you," he paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I've come to care for you both. For you especially." Hannah's heart thundered in her chest. "Zach, we've known each other less than a week." "I know," he acknowledged, "and under ordinary circumstances I wouldn't speak so soon, but our circumstances haven't been ordinary, have they?" "No," Hannah admitted softly, "they haven't." Zach took another step toward her. "In the past 5 days, I've seen your courage, your determination, your love for your sister. I've watched you face danger without flinching and adapt to each new challenge with grace." His voice deepened. "I may not have known you long, Hannah Bailey, but I know enough to recognize a woman of extraordinary quality when I meet one." Hannah felt something unfurl inside her, a warmth, a hope she had almost forgotten could exist. "I've come to care for you too," she confessed. "More than I should, perhaps." Zach's eyes lit with something that made her breath catch. "I'm not asking for promises, Hannah, only permission to court you properly, now that we're settled somewhere safe, to see if what I feel, what I hope we both feel, can grow into something lasting." Hannah searched his face, finding nothing but sincere emotion in his steady gaze. After years of her uncle's cruelty and deception, Zach's straightforward honesty was like water in a desert. "Yes," she said simply, "I would like that very much." Joy transformed his features. For a moment, Hannah thought he might embrace her, but he restrained himself, ever respectful. "Thank you," he said instead, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't disappoint you, Hannah." Before she could respond, the door opened and Emma returned, her timing suspiciously convenient. She glanced between them, taking in their close proximity and the undoubtedly telling expressions on their faces. "Did I miss anything important?" she asked innocently. Zach laughed, the sound rich and warm in the small cabin. "Nothing that can't be shared with a sister," he assured her. "I've asked Hannah's permission to court her, and she's agreed." Emma's face lit up with delight. "Finally, I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar to get you to admit your feelings." "Emma." Hannah exclaimed, mortified but unable to suppress a laugh at her sister's audacity. Well, it's true, Emma insisted. Anyone with eyes could see how you two look at each other. She turned to Zach. I approve, by the way, not that Hannah needs my permission, but I thought you might like to know. Zach bowed slightly, his eyes twinkling. Your approval means a great deal, Miss Emma. Thank you. The three of them stood in the small cabin, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. They had begun as strangers thrown together by desperate circumstances, and somehow, against all odds, had become something like a family. I should go, Zach said reluctantly. It's getting late, and you both need rest after our journey. Hannah walked him to the door. Will we see you tomorrow? Count on it, Zach replied softly. Good night, Hannah Bailey. Good night, Zachary Porter, she whispered back as she closed the door behind him. Hannah leaned against it, a smile spreading across her face. Emma watched her with knowing eyes. He's a good man, Emma said simply. Hannah nodded, still smiling. Yes, he is. That night, as they lay together in their narrow bed, Hannah stared up at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the strange night sounds of their new home, the soft hoot of an owl, the rustle of pine branches against the roof, the distant murmur of the creek. For the first time in 3 years, she fell asleep without fear. Her heart full of hope for what tomorrow might bring. Spring bloomed in Pine Creek, the snow melting from the mountainsides to feed the rushing creek that gave the town its name. Hannah and Emma quickly established themselves in the small community, their sewing skills in high demand among the women who had made do with rough-hewn garments for too long. Hannah set up a workroom in the corner of their cabin, where a large window provided the best light for detailed stitchwork. Emma, whose eyesight was sharper, specialized in fine embroidery, creating delicate designs that became the envy of every woman in town. True to his word, Zach remained in Pine Creek, working alongside the blacksmith during the day and spending his evenings with Hannah and Emma. His courtship of Hannah progressed with proper decorum but unmistakable intent, walking her home from church services, bringing small gifts of wildflowers or books borrowed from Rebecca's growing school library, and occasionally taking her for rides in the mountains when Emma could chaperone. He's going to ask you to marry him, Emma predicted one evening in late May as they prepared for bed. Probably at the Midsummer Festival. That's what Mrs. Bergman hinted at today when she was being fitted for her new dress. Hannah concentrated on brushing her hair, hoping the activity would hide her blush. Mrs. Bergman should mind her own affairs, Emma laughed. In a town this size, impossible. Besides, everyone approves. Even Mr. Lindstrom said Zach has proven himself a valuable addition to Pine Creek. Hannah couldn't deny the truth of this. Zach had thrown himself into community life with unexpected enthusiasm, helping with everything from barn raisings to organizing a much-needed repair of the church roof. His strength and skills were appreciated by all, and his fair dealings had earned him universal respect. If he does ask, Hannah said slowly, what would you think about that? Truly, Emma's expression softened. I would be happy for you both. He loves you, Hannah. Anyone can see it. And you love him too, don't you? Hannah nodded, unable to deny what had become increasingly obvious to herself and everyone around them. I do, but what about our plans? San Francisco, a new start. Plans change, Emma said wisely. Besides, I like it here. I feel safe, valued, don't you? Hannah had to admit she did. Pine Creek, with its simple ways and tight-knit community, had become more of a home than she could have imagined. And Zach had become the center of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. The Midsummer Festival arrived in a blaze of sunshine and celebration. The entire town gathered in the meadow beside the creek, where tables groaned under the weight of traditional Swedish dishes alongside American favorites. Fiddle music filled the air as children ran laughing through the grass and adults visited in groups, enjoying the rare day of leisure. Hannah wore a new dress for the occasion, deep blue cotton with white embroidery she had worked on secretly during the long evenings. Emma had helped with the most intricate parts, her nimble fingers creating a pattern of forget-me-nots along the collar and cuffs. You look beautiful, Zach said when he came to escort them to the festival. His eyes, warm with admiration, made Hannah feel as though she were wearing the finest silk instead of simple cotton. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy despite the months of growing closeness between them. The day passed in a pleasant blur of food, music, and conversation. Hannah found herself welcomed into groups of women who had once seemed so foreign, now laughing and sharing stories as if she had always been part of their community. Emma spent much of her time with the younger people, including the blacksmith's son, a quiet young man whose admiring glances had not gone unnoticed by Hannah's watchful eye. As evening approached and lanterns were lit around the meadow, Zach drew Hannah aside, leading her to a quiet spot beneath an ancient pine tree overlooking the festivities. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice serious despite the celebration around them. Hannah's heart quickened. "Yes," Zach took both her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. "Hannah Bailey, when I found you and Emma that night running from danger, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. These past months have been the happiest I can remember. For me as well," Hannah whispered. Zach smiled, drawing a deep breath. "I love you, Hannah. Your strength, your kindness, your fierce protection of those you care for. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side if you'll have me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I've carried it with me since she passed, waiting for the right woman to wear it." Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes as he knelt before her on the soft grass. "Hannah Bailey, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, her voice clear and sure. "Yes, Zachary Porter, I will marry you." Joy blazed across his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, sweet with the promise of all that was to come. When they returned to the festival, hand in hand, Emma spotted them immediately. Her delighted squeal drew everyone's attention, and soon they were surrounded by well-wishers, the entire community celebrating their engagement. "We must plan the wedding before winter comes, Mrs. Bergman declared authoritatively. "A proper ceremony in the church with a feast after. And you must let us help with your dress," added Ingrid Nilsson. "It should be special, yes," Hannah laughed, overwhelmed by the immediate outpouring of support. "Thank you, all of you." "We haven't set a date yet, August," Zach interrupted confidently. "Before the harvest begins. If that suits you, Hannah," she smiled up at him, marveling at how seamlessly he had adopted the rhythms and priorities of their new community. August would be perfect. As the celebration continued around them, Rebecca Thornton approached, her face alight with genuine pleasure. "Congratulations to you both," she said warmly. "I had a feeling that first night in the line shack that you were meant for each other." "We have you to thank for bringing us to Pine Creek," Hannah replied, reaching out to squeeze the older woman's hand. "I'm not sure we would have found such happiness elsewhere." Rebecca smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Sometimes the path we least expect leads us exactly where we need to be." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The entire town became involved, from the men who helped Zach build an addition onto Hannah and Emma's cabin, to the women who gathered regularly to assist with Hannah's wedding dress, a creation of cream-colored silk, ordered specially from Carson City, with lace that the oldest women in town insisted on providing from their precious keepsakes. "It brings luck," Mrs. Bergman explained as she presented Hannah with a delicate lace veil that had been in her family for generations. "Something old from the old country." Emma threw herself into the preparations with characteristic enthusiasm, determined that her sister should have the perfect wedding day. She worked secretly on a special gift, a quilt pieced together from scraps of beautiful fabrics they had collected over the months, each square embroidered with scenes from their journey and new life in Pine Creek. On the morning of the wedding, Hannah stood in their cabin, gazing at her reflection in the small mirror Emma had insisted they purchase from the general store. The woman who looked back at her seemed a stranger radiant in cream silk, her dark hair arranged in soft curls beneath Mrs. Bergman's antique veil. "You look like Mama," Emma said softly from behind her, dressed in a new gown of pale blue that brought out the color of her eyes. She would be so proud of you, of us both." Hannah turned to embrace her sister, careful not to wrinkle either of their dresses. "I wish she could be here, Father too." "They are, in a way," Emma assured her. "They're the reason we became who we are, strong enough to escape, brave enough to start over." A knock at the door announced Rebecca's arrival. She entered bearing a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon. "The final touch," she said, presenting it to Hannah. "Gathered this morning from the meadow where Zach proposed." Hannah accepted the bouquet, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "Thank you, Rebecca, for everything." Rebecca smiled, adjusting Hannah's veil with a maternal touch. "You have built something beautiful here, Hannah. Not just a new life, but a family. Hold on to it with both hands." The small church was filled to capacity. Every resident of Pine Creek in attendance to witness the union of the seamstress and the blacksmith's assistant, who had become such integral parts of their community. Flowers decorated every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air as Hannah walked down the short aisle on Lars Lindström's arm, the older man having volunteered to give her away in her father's stead. Zach waited at the altar, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving Hannah as she approached. The love in his gaze made her feel as though they were the only two people in the room, despite the crowd of witnesses. Emma stood beside Hannah throughout the simple ceremony, her presence a reminder of all they had endured together and the bonds that would always unite them, even as Hannah formed new ties. "I, Zachary Porter, take thee, Hannah Bailey, to be my lawful wedded wife." Zach's voice rang clear and strong through the church as he repeated the minister's words. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When Hannah spoke her own vows, she was surprised by the steadiness of her voice, the absolute certainty she felt in making this commitment. The journey that had begun in fear and flight had led her to this moment of perfect clarity. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with feasting, dancing, and toasts to the happy couple. As darkness fell, Zach led Hannah away from the festivities to the newly expanded cabin that would now be their home. Emma had arranged to stay with Rebecca for a few days, giving the newlyweds privacy to begin their life together. "Mrs. Porter," Zach said softly as he carried Hannah across the threshold, honoring the old tradition. "I like the sound of that." Hannah smiled up at him as he set her gently on her feet in their home, now transformed with new furnishings and touches that reflected both their tastes. "As do I, Mr. Porter." Zach's hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness. "I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your love, Hannah. That's my promise to you." "You already are," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to meet his kiss. Life in Pine Creek settled into a rhythm for the Porters and Emma. Zach eventually took over the blacksmith shop when old Mr. Johansson decided to retire, while Hannah and Emma's seamstress business flourished, expanding to serve neighboring communities as their reputation spread. A year after the wedding, Hannah and Zach welcomed their first child, a son they named Thomas James Porter, after Zach's fallen brother and Hannah's father. Emma doted on her nephew, spoiling him shamelessly while continuing to develop her own talents as an artist and embroiderer. "Have you ever regretted not going to San Francisco?" Hannah asked her sister one evening as they sat on the porch of the Porter home, watching Zach play with 2-year-old Thomas in the yard. Emma considered the question, her eyes following the antics of her brother-in-law and nephew. "Not once," she said honestly. "This is where we were meant to be. I feel it in my bones." Hannah nodded, one hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly where their second child was growing. "I feel the same." They never heard from Silas Bailey again, though occasionally news reached them through travelers or newspapers. His ranch had fallen into disrepair, his fortunes declining as steadily as his reputation. Some said he had taken to drink even more heavily, while others reported he had left Nevada territory altogether, fleeing creditors and former associates. "Do you ever think about him?" Zach asked Hannah one night years later as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, their children sleeping peacefully down the hall. Hannah considered this. Less and less, she admitted. He has no power over us anymore, no place in our lives. Zach gathered her closer. You amaze me, Hannah Porter, your capacity for moving forward, for building something beautiful from such difficult beginnings. We built it together, Hannah reminded him, nestling into the familiar comfort of his embrace. You, me, Emma. Even the people of Pine Creek who welcomed us when we had nothing. I thank God every day for leading me to that creek bed, Zach murmured, his voice thick with emotion, for the chance to find you both. Hannah smiled in the darkness, thinking of the long, winding path that had brought them to this place of peace and prosperity. What had begun as a desperate flight from danger had become a journey to home, not just a physical place, but the sanctuary they had created together, bound by love and strengthened by shared experience. We thank God for you too, she whispered back, our protector, our family. Outside their window, the pine trees whispered in the mountain breeze, standing sentinel over the small town that had become their haven. And in the safety of their home, Hannah and Zach slept, their dreams no longer haunted by the past but filled with the promise of all the days yet to come. When Thomas was 7 and their daughter Eliza 5, Zach expanded their home again, adding a proper workshop for Hannah's growing business and a small study where Emma, now a renowned illustrator of children's books, could work on her drawings. The Porter home became the heart of Pine Creek, a gathering place for celebrations and community meetings alike. Emma eventually married the blacksmith's son, Carl Johansson, a quiet, steady man whose devotion to her was evident to all. They built their own home near Hannah and Zach's, ensuring the sisters remained close as their family grew. On the 10th anniversary of their arrival in Pine Creek, the entire town gathered for a special celebration. Hannah stood with Zach's arm around her waist, Emma and Carl beside them, surrounded by their children and the community that had become their extended family. If someone had told me that night we fled Crooked Pine Ranch where we would end up, Hannah mused, watching as Thomas led his younger cousins in a game of tag, I never would have believed them. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us exactly where we need to be, Emma replied, echoing Rebecca's words from so long ago. Rebecca herself, now the respected headmistress of the Pine Creek School, raised her glass in a toast. To beginnings found in endings, she called. And to the courage it takes to run toward a better future. As the celebration continued around them, Zach drew Hannah slightly apart from the crowd, his expression thoughtful. What is it? She asked, recognizing the look that meant he had something important to say. I was just thinking about that first night, he said. How close I came to not being there when you needed help. I had almost decided to take a different route home. Hannah shuddered at the thought. But you were there, that's what matters, Zach nodded, drawing her close. 10 years ago, I thought I was simply helping 2 young women escape danger. I had no idea I was finding my own way home in the process. Hannah rose on tiptoe to kiss him, still moved by the depth of feeling between them after all these years. Every step of that journey was worth it, to end up here with you. As they rejoined the celebration, Hannah's gaze swept over the life they had built, their healthy, happy children, Emma and Carl's growing family, the thriving businesses they had established, the friends who had become family in this remote mountain town. From the darkest night of her life had come this abundant day, this place of belonging. The sisters who had fled their uncle's ranch under cover of darkness had found not just safety, but a future brighter than they had dared to imagine. Guided by a cowboy whose own lonely trail had led him to exactly where he needed to be with them. Creating a family bound not by blood but by choice, by love, and by the shared journey that had brought them home at last.